Two men, same auto parts warehouse, same paycheck, same town, 22 years. One walked away with $141,000 in the bank. The other walked away with $6,800 in credit card debt and no plan for what came next. Same income, completely different outcomes. What separated them wasn't luck, a degree, or a lucky stock pick. It was 10 habits so unremarkable, most people scroll straight past them without a second thought. Stick with me, because by habit 7, you're going to see money completely differently than you did 5 minutes ago. Quick note before we start. I'm not a financial advisor, and any growth rate I mention later is a long-term historical average, not a guarantee. Treat this as a framework, not a promise. It's 1991, a mid-sized town outside Dayton, Ohio. Walt has worked the same auto parts warehouse for 22 years. He drives a paid-off 1983 Ford Ranger. Every day he packs the same turkey sandwich in a lunch cooler that's older than his youngest kid. His wife plans the week's meals on an index card taped inside the pantry door. His coworker Doug works the identical shift, the identical wage. But Doug leases a new Chevy every 3 years. He grabs lunch at the diner across the street most days. His wife pushes a cart through the grocery store without ever glancing at a list. On paper, these two men are identical. By 2001, when the warehouse gets bought out and both of them are let go, Walt has $141,000 saved. Doug has $6,800 in debt and no direction. They earned the same money for over 2 decades. So what actually happened? This isn't a story about luck. It isn't about some brilliant investment. It's about something far less exciting. 10 unremarkable habits that either quietly build wealth or quietly drain it. Here's a number worth sitting with. Median household income in the U.S. runs somewhere around the mid-$70,000 a year. Over a 30-year working life, that's well over $2 million passing through a single household. $2 million. And yet the median American household reaches retirement with well under $100,000 saved. Where did the rest go? Not to one catastrophic loss, not to one bad investment. It went to thousands of small, ordinary decisions repeated daily for decades. Back in 1996, researchers Thomas Stanley and William Danko published a landmark study of real American millionaires. Not celebrities, not people who inherited money, just ordinary earners who quietly built 7-figure net worths. Their single biggest finding? Income wasn't the strongest predictor of wealth. Frugality was. The people who ended up wealthy were, overwhelmingly, just the people who kept more of what came in. Here's exactly how that plays out, habit by habit. Habit 1. The financed vehicle. The average new car payment today runs north of $700 a month. Let that sit for a second. That's well over $8,000 a year for an asset that loses roughly a quarter of its value in the first 12 months alone. Finance $42,000 on a new vehicle, and by your first year of payments, the car might be worth around $30,000. You've paid in over $8,000. The asset dropped over $12,000 in value. That's not really a purchase. It's a wealth transfer, straight out of your account. A reliable used vehicle, 5 to 7 years old, a Toyota or a Honda with a track record, has already absorbed most of that depreciation curve. Insurance runs cheaper. Repairs on a well-understood model are predictable. Take that roughly $700 a month gap and invest it in a simple index fund at something close to a 7% historical average return, and in about 15 years, you're looking at somewhere around $150,000 to $170,000, before you even count the cheaper insurance or the interest you never paid. The average person buys somewhere between 8 and 12 vehicles over a lifetime. Every new one is either quietly building your future or quietly building someone else's. Habit 2. The meal rotation. This sounds too simple to matter. It isn't. The average household spends somewhere around $450 to $500 a month on groceries. Households that build meals around 4 or 5 rotating staples typically spend 30 to 40% less. That's roughly $130 to $180 saved a month, around $1,800 to $2,000 a year. Mondays pasta, Tuesdays rice bowls, Wednesdays tacos. Repetitive, unglamorous. And it works. Once you know what you're cooking, your grocery list becomes automatic. You stop wandering the aisles. You stop buying ingredients for a recipe you'll never actually make. Households that survived the leanest economic periods in modern history weren't usually the richest ones. They were the most systematic. They had routines, and routines eliminate the daily decision fatigue that quietly leads to overspending. Habit 3. The food that never gets eaten. Even a great meal plan can't save you from this one. The average household throws away roughly 30 to 40% of the food it buys, somewhere around $1,400 to $1,500 a year, straight into the trash. The milk that expires untouched, the vegetables wilting in the crisper, the leftovers pushed to the back and forgotten. This isn't carelessness. It's partly by design. Grocery stores are built to encourage overbuying. Bulk discounts make excess feel like a good deal, even when half of it goes to waste. The fix is almost embarrassingly simple. Before buying more, use what's already there. A single Eat from the Pantry week each month can cut food waste by roughly 40 to 50%, somewhere around $600 to $700 a year back in your pocket, just from using what you already paid for. Habit 4. The beverage tax you pay yourself. You've heard the coffee argument before, but stay with me, because the real number isn't the one people usually quote. A daily coffee shop drink runs $5 to $7. Home-brewed coffee runs under $1. The annual gap? Somewhere around $1,400 to $2,000. Invested at a 7% historical average return over 30 years, that daily habit becomes somewhere in the neighborhood of $180,000 to $200,000. Not from the coffee itself, from what it could have compounded into instead. A basic coffee maker costs $25 to $30. Good beans run about $12 to $15 a pound and make dozens of cups. The coffee shop isn't really selling you caffeine, it's selling convenience and a quiet suggestion that making your own is somehow less sophisticated. It isn't. We're roughly at the halfway point of this video. Statistically, this is where a lot of people stop watching. Don't. Habit 5 is the single biggest daily leak most working people never actually sit down and calculate. If this is landing for you, go ahead and subscribe now. The next 5 habits are where the real compounding lives. Habit 5. The bought lunch. A restaurant lunch runs $11 to $16. A packed lunch runs $3 to $5. 5 purchased lunches a week adds up to somewhere between $2,800 and $4,200 a year. Pack your own, and that drops to $700 to $1,300, a gap of roughly $2,000 to $3,000 every year. Compounded over a 35 to 40-year career, that's several $100,000 easily. And it doesn't stop at the office. Airports, road trips, tourist spots, food bought away from home routinely carries a 200 to 400% markup. A $13 airport sandwich costs about $3 to make it home. 15 minutes the night before a trip. Sandwiches, snacks, a filled water bottle can save $40 to $90 on a single travel day. Habit 6. The friction you removed from your own spending. Online shopping is efficient. It's also efficient at separating you from your money. Research consistently shows people spend somewhere around 15 to 30% more shopping online than in person. In a physical store, you feel the weight of the cart. You watch the total climb at checkout. Those moments create natural pauses where you reconsider. Online, that friction is deliberately engineered away. One click, saved card details, algorithm-driven suggestions for things you didn't know you wanted. Reducing friction to increase purchases isn't a rumor. It's a stated strategy for a lot of major online retailers. The fix is to put the friction back on purpose. Shop in person when it's practical. Delete saved payment info. Remove shopping apps from your phone. Apply a 48-hour rule to anything online over $50. Every bit of friction is a chance to keep your own money instead of handing it over on autopilot. Habit 7. The wardrobe that never stops cycling. The average American spends somewhere around $1,700 to $1,900 a year on clothing, much of it worn fewer than 10 times before it's forgotten or discarded. Fast fashion is built around exactly that cycle. Cheap enough to buy on impulse, poorly made enough to guarantee a replacement. A capsule wardrobe breaks the loop entirely. A small, curated set of quality, versatile basics that mix and match across seasons, often well under 30 total items. The upfront cost per item is higher. A $180 pair of shoes replaces 5 $50 pairs. A well-made shirt lasts years instead of months. Households that switch to this approach typically cut clothing spending by 50 to 70%, roughly $900 to $1,300 back a year. There's a second, harder to quantify benefit too: less daily decision fatigue. Some of the most famous efficiency-obsessed people in business, famously more than one tech founder, wore some version of the same outfit daily for exactly this reason. Not because they didn't care about clothes, because they were deliberate about where their mental energy went each morning. Now for the 3 habits that are less about cutting spending and more about deliberately building wealth, starting with the one that works with mathematical certainty every single time. Habit 8. Paying yourself first. The standard money flow for most people is earn, spend, save whatever's left. The problem is structural. There's rarely anything left because expenses quietly expand to match whatever comes in. That's not a willpower failure. It's ordinary, predictable human psychology. Paying yourself first flips that order completely. The moment your paycheck lands, before a single bill gets paid, a fixed, predetermined amount moves automatically into savings and investments. Set the transfer for the day after payday and remove yourself from the decision entirely. People who automate their savings this way consistently build meaningfully larger balances over a decade than people who try to save manually. The temptation to spend it never gets the chance to show up because the money's already gone. Habit 9. Staying behind your income. Here's the trap that quietly undoes Habit 8 the moment income rises. When most people get a raise, their lifestyle expands right along with it. A nicer apartment, a new car, a bigger vacation. That's lifestyle inflation, and it's a big part of why so many high earners still retire with very little. Broader survey data on household finances consistently shows that households earning well into 6 figures often save at roughly the same rate as households earning half that. They simply consume more without necessarily accumulating more. The counter is simple, if not exactly comfortable. When you get a raise, change nothing for 24 months. Keep living at your previous level and automatically invest the entire difference. Do it across every raise over a career, and the gap compounds into hundreds of thousands of dollars that would otherwise have quietly disappeared into a slightly nicer version of the same life. Habit 10. A second stream. Self-made millionaires very commonly report multiple income streams. This isn't about working a second job until you're exhausted. It's about turning something you'd already do for free into something that also pays. A primary job has a ceiling, fixed hours, incremental raises, a rate someone else controls. A monetized hobby doesn't have that ceiling. You control the hours, and you keep the upside. Writing, teaching, consulting, building something small on the side. These energize rather than drain, which is the real distinction from a second job. An extra $400 to $500 a month from something like this is $5,000 to $6,000 a year. Invested at a 7% historical average over 20 years, that becomes somewhere in the range of $220,000 to $260,000. Not from hustle culture, but from the same logic smart investors use to diversify a portfolio, applied to income instead. Add all 10 up, conservatively. Used vehicle instead of financing new. Meal rotation, using what's already in the pantry. Home coffee. packed lunches and travel food, in-person shopping, a capsule wardrobe, each contributing anywhere from a few hundred to several $1,000s a year in avoided spending, plus a modest second income stream on top. Put together, a conservative household applying all 10 consistently is often looking at somewhere in the range of $20,000 to $25,000 a year in combined savings and additional income. Invested at a 7% historical average over 25 years, that becomes somewhere between roughly $1.3 and $1.6 million. Not from an inheritance, not from a lucky trade. From a used car, a packed lunch, home-brewed coffee, and 25 years of quiet repetition. That's the mechanism Walt understood, without ever putting a name to it. It's the one Doug never picked up on. Look across every generation that's actually built wealth from an ordinary income. People who lived through hard economic stretches, post-war households, families who arrived with nothing and retired with real options. The habits look almost identical every time. They drove vehicles until they genuinely couldn't be repaired. They rotated the same handful of meals. They wasted very little. They saved before they spent. They stayed behind their income no matter how much it grew. And they usually found at least one additional way to earn from a skill they already had. These aren't secrets, they're just patterns. And patterns work because they line up with arithmetic. Small amounts saved consistently, compounded over time, become large amounts. That's not a philosophy, that's just math. Every single day, you're either quietly building your future or quietly lending it away. There's no neutral option. Walt understood that. He just never made it complicated. If this changed how you think about money, subscribe to The Quiet Ledger. This channel is built entirely around the unglamorous patterns the data actually supports. No hype, no shortcuts, just the boring math that works.